All right. Good morning, evening, middle of the night, whenever it is you're watching this video. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the chronic family. This is chapter 13. So differentiation in the midst of chaos would be another way to say that. I guess it's common sense to say that the more chaos there is going on, the more uh, volatility, even silent treatment type stuff, gaminess, negative things going on in the family, the worse all that is, the more intense all that is, the more difficult it is for us to find ourselves, to differentiate from between emotion and uh, uh, intellect, as well as to be able to differentiate from our family that's being all kinds of crazy. Um, so, as you're working with people, you want to keep this in mind and keep this in the backdrop because when we have those really chaotic families, it's like, oh, um, it's going to be tough uh, for people to really make any true lasting change in that type of an environment. Okay, so one of the concepts is anxiety, and that's something that Bowen says is really key and central. The higher the anxiety level, the less likely we are, the less our ability to differentiate lessens. Whew, I'm having a hard time talking today. Um, and obviously, the more severe the issues are, the more anxiety there is. So it's just this cycle that perpetuates itself and worsens. Um, I hope you see my almost always, right? Usually, but almost always, right? So when you start to make changes and you start responding in healthy ways, and that's going to mean in a chaotic family, a chronic family, that's going to mean setting boundaries. That's going to mean not screaming and yelling with them. It's going to mean walking away from a fight instead of taking on a fight, so to speak. So you start doing these things, and people flip out like you would not believe. It's really scary for them. They don't know that. They can't tell you that. They're just angry because you are not playing the game that we play. And it's just not acceptable. You just can't do that. There is a concept that we talk about also in family systems in general, not necessarily Bowen, of homeostasis. And people go, oh, yeah, homeostasis, everything balanced. That's a good thing, right? Yeah, no, not in this text, in this context. In this context, homeostasis means that um, it is a sick system and it, quote, works, but it really doesn't work. Sorry. Oh, I almost spilt my coffee all over my computer. Would not have been wonderful. I would not have been happy. Okay. Um, so that's as you are, if you're working with an individual, if you're working with the whole family, that helps. But if you're working with an individual and you're going to send it back home to change the dynamic and change the way they interact with their family, one of the things you want to do is warn them that it's going to get ugly, and they're going to shut you out, scream, yell, cry, cuss, give you the silent treatment, ignore you, exclude you from family events, not invite you to things. I mean, whatever all's going to happen. And so people have to literally decide: do I want to continue the craziness and be in with my family, or do I want to say, you know what, forget it, it's not worth it to me? And I'll tell people, you have to make that decision. I want them to know, kind of what they're getting into. All right, so uh, the textbook breaks it down into four phases, and I like that. And the author admittedly admits that these four phases are not Bowen's four phases. These are phases that he just simply observed and said, these are the things that we do as we work through this process, which makes sense. Phases do not have to be perfectly in order. There can be some back and forth, and you'll see in phase four, actually phase four says continue 1 through 3, basically. So you may do some work on your family history, go to number 2, I'm trying to identify some patterns, then go back and work on some family history more, and create a strategy, and then go back and look at history again. So there is a starting point, and that is to start with looking at your family history. And the ending point is that we do this for the rest of our lives. And I'm not. This is pure Bowenian theory. I think as Christians, we're interested in growing. We're interested in being healthy, just in general, for the rest of our lives. So my thinking on this is not that I'm going to do Bowenian style therapy on myself for the rest of my life, as much as it is that I'm going to do something. And I'll use these concepts for sure, but I want to do something to ensure that I am growing and working on improving. Y'all remember Where's Waldo? Look at this. I love this. I know y'all are like, you're wasting my time now. So where's Waldo? Well, Waldo has finally found himself. He has been in enough therapy now that he has found himself. Isn't that exciting? I know some of y'all are like, oh my gosh, come on. And some of y'all are grinning, and some of you are actually laughing right now, probably. Okay. So you would begin your counseling sessions with all of the basic counseling skills. I think at this point, probably most of you have had some basic skills counseling classes. So you're going to empathize, listen, warmth, empathy, establish rapport, reflective listening, all the eye contact, body language, all the stuff that you do, creating a comfortable environment, all the things that you would do normally. And then you're going to move to encourage them to do a family diagram, or another another word would be a genogram. And but you want to, and I say with issues, in other words, you want to make sure that you label highly conflictual relationships, people who have abandoned, you can just put down there that this couple is divorced. Well, okay, but what's the perception of what happened, right? Did she abandon him? Did he abandon her? Those kinds of things. So that people can begin to identify some of the patterns in their family of origin and possibly extended family. I usually encourage people to at least, it depends on how old the person is at some level too, but at least you want to do your family of origin. But then let's also go beyond that and do your maternal and paternal grandparents as much as you can. And it doesn't mean, and especially as Christians, I don't believe that that we're locked into things. But I do believe that we need to be aware of how we're influenced by our family of origin and our ancestors beyond that. I have a thing that I fight a little bit. I have this adventure, sometimes a restless spirit thing, right? And so when I look at my family history and I look back, I think of the great grandfather who left for the gold rush and never to be seen or heard from again. So it's crazy. I mean, he abandoned his family, obviously, just straight up abandoned his family. Nobody really has any idea what happened to him. He was never seen nor heard from again. So, fell off his horse and hit a rock and died, got jumped, found gold in somebody bigger and tougher and meaner and stronger, killed him and took it from him. It was just we have no idea, right? So, but the point is he was one of the ones that went, and there was a lot of people that considered leaving that didn't actually go, and I really believe that. That's where I got my. Sometimes I just need to go. I'll just go out in the garage or just go outside. I just got to move. I got to. It's kind of a restless thing, and to a degree, it could be negative. Obviously, I keep it under check, or I wouldn't have been married for 32 years. Um, but um, but I use that not to get focused on me and talk about me, but that's an example. My grandfather smoked, my father smoked. I smoked in middle school. That's about it as far as my smoking career. But I very well could have gone on and smoked, right? I mean, that would have been normal, if you will. So you're looking also for emotional patterns. My grandfather cut off his brother at one point, well, till their death, which is just breaks my heart, just sad as all get out. Um, talking about emotional patterns, how did Grandma and Grandpa relate to each other? How did Grandma and Grandpa's kids relate to them? How did Grandma and Grandpa's kids relate to each other, which would be your aunts and uncles and your parents, by the way. If you're following me on all that, I think. um, so emotional patterns, right? Because that way we can see like, oh, I have a real tendency to want to just shut you out and not talk to you, or oh, I have a tendency to scream and yell and blow up, and it lasts for 2 minutes, and then I'm all like, okay, we're all good now, and everybody else is devastated, and I can't figure out why, right? Like, oh, right. So it can be really powerful and really helpful in terms of understanding your own emotional patterns, emotional baggage, we could say. So the next step is that we actually take responsibility, encourage the client that we're working with to take responsibility for their stuff, their part in uh, uh, whatever the problem is. And here's an interesting thing, right? So I'm thinking about a family I was working with, right? Teenager mom and dad. So I'm trying to teach them the concept. I'm trying to get them to understand the concept of everyone has a part, right? Everyone plays a part. So there's things, as I'll say, there's two buckets of behaviors, phrases, things we say, things we do. Non-behaviors are also behaviors, right? I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. Yeah, you were ignoring them. That's a behavior. Um, so I tell the family, all of you have two buckets. One of those things is things that you do that help the situation, and the other is things that you do that harm the situation. And there's probably a few things that are innocuous and don't affect it one way or the other, but we don't care about those things. So we want to all get on board with putting as much into doing things that will help the situation. And so when we start moving down that road of taking responsibility for your part, it's real quick, real easy for families to jump to, well, you're just trying to lay all the blame on me. And I remember this has happened with several of my families I worked with. And I'm like, no, no, that's, I mean, it's really bad when someone's convinced it's that way you're doing, because it's really hard to undo that. So you want to hopefully get them to that point where they realize it and recognize it. If it's hard for them to do that, then they're probably very tendency to blame others or their self, right? So people who tend to blame don't take responsibility, right? I mean, that's that's kind of how that works. Um, so I want them to understand that, look, we all have a part. It's not a matter of it's your part, right? So whatever that, and it may not even be that it's something wrong that you do. You talk a lot or you don't talk much or whatever, right? Okay, that's fine. That's kind of how you are. Usually it's body language, it's, harsh words, it's things like that. Expressing frustrations, whatever it might be. Okay. Phase three is helping them come up with a strategy for change. And I like this concept of like, okay, what's important to you? What are your life principles? As Christians, we ought to be able to come up with some good lists of that. But you're talking about how much do you value relationships? How much do you value your family? Do you shoot straight with people? Say what you mean and mean what you say. Are you honest? Are you straightforward? Uh, do you apologize? Do you attend significant family events? I've got a daughter that just got engaged this last weekend, and one of the things that we look at and talk about is who's going to come. And I can remember it was last night. We were talking about some family members, and my wife's like, "Yeah, no, they don't ever come to any of our kids' weddings, like, and they're not that far away. We're not super close, but we're okay." It was just kind of interesting, and it was like, all right. So again, and that's one of the things that we talk about healthy families. Healthy people attend family events. You attend weddings and funerals and graduations, and you're there for family events, birthdays sometimes, anniversaries, whatever, depending on the individual family culture, and that can vary and change, and I get all that. Um, how good are people at apologizing in a family? Those kinds of things. Entering and exiting an emotional system, realizing that there is impact in that. And we're not talking about cutting off, we're just talking about literally physically when you show up, that it changes things. All right, I think I'm going to start getting redundant if I don't move on. I like this picture because this is talking about making it a lifelong process, and I said it's a long journey. And I think about like, okay, if I'm out, that looks really cold and nasty, and it's snow, and it's like, bleh. And man, if I'm walking from here to there, it's a long journey, right? But so walking out of the cold, long journey, a little memory trick there, hopefully, that we are always committed to better understanding our own emotional patterns, better understanding our family and our family's emotional patterns, and that we are proactive and intentional in working on having healthier responses and reactions and interactions with people. And that is the last slide. And if I can find my button to turn this off, I will do so. But thank you guys. Goodbye. God bless. Good night. And I will see you on the next video.